we believe in the power of science, exploration, education, and storytelling to illuminate and protect the wonder of our world. That's the business we're in. We're using all of these platforms to illuminate the world, and we hope it drives action so people care about the world and they do something about it.
Welcome to A Life Well Lived, where we pull back the curtain on the extraordinary lives of our remarkable members. I'm James Henderson, CEO of Exclusive Resorts. For me, travel's never been about the destination, it's always been about the company you keep. Over the years, I've crossed paths with some of the world's most fascinating, well-traveled individuals, each bound by a singular pursuit: to live not just well, but exceptionally. Their stories aren't just worth telling, they're worth learning from. Because in the end, it's not about where we go, but how we choose to live. In this episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jean Case, whose career spans business, philanthropy, and social impact. With nearly 2 decades in the private sector, including as senior executive at AOL during its explosive growth, Jean went on to co-found the Case Foundation with her husband Steve in 1997. Since then, she's been a pioneer in impact investing, a national voice for social innovation, and a champion of entrepreneurship and civic engagement. Today, Jean serves as CEO of the Case Foundation and Case Impact Network, chair of the National Geographic Society, and sits on the boards of the Smithsonian American Women's History Museum and the White House Historical Association. She's also best-selling author of Be Fearless, a bold call to action for anyone looking to make a difference. So welcome to our podcast, Jean Case. We're very excited to have you.
Thanks, James. I've really been looking forward to being here and being with you.
Thank you. So I want to start off. You've worn many hats in your life: philanthropist, leader, investor, even winery owner. So when you meet someone new, how do you introduce yourself?
I say my name, just like everyone else. Hi, I'm Jean. And I don't always include Case, depending on the environment. But I'll go context, too. So I'm just fresh from a conference this weekend. And if I have something that's kind of an agenda when I'm meeting people, then I'll put that in context. So I'll say, hi, I'm Jean. I'm chairman of National Geographic, just to set the table of why am I here talking to you. But if it's a more casual environment, never do I use titles.
So many people know you as the chair of National Geographic Society, but you started your career in the early days of tech and took a chance on what at the time was a relatively unknown startup, which became AOL. That was a big bet, as you talk about, I think, and we'll talk more about that later. But what drew you to the tech world and that business at the time?
Yeah, it's a story I particularly love to tell young people because actually AOL was my third online business that I had gone to.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I worked for the first online service in the world, actually. It was called The Source. And I'd love to sit here and pretend I was smart enough to see the vision and chose that. But the fact of the matter is it came out of really a failure. I had been working for President Reagan. The government went through one of those threatened government shutdowns and then shutting down. And the funding for my position was going to be, cut off for a small period of time. And like everyone else, I was young, I had rent, I had a car payment. And they came in and said, oh, Jean, it's all good. Like, if you can just go sit tight at home for a while, we're sure we're going to get the funding for this position back. I'm like, who can sit tight? I've got bills to pay. If I'm not going to get a paycheck here, I have to go get a paycheck somewhere else. So it just turned out, again, one of those weird things of life, but often those are the moments you should pay attention to, but we don't. The first online service was right down the road, and they needed some help with a national gathering they were going to do. And so I went over as a temporary person, thinking I'd go back to work for President Reagan, but fell in love, saw the vision, believed totally in the future. Then went on to GE to help them start an online service, and then was finally, even though it's so early in the arc of history now, was recruited by this company that was going to become AOL, a small, teeny little startup.
We'll talk about the Be Fearless in a minute, but did you have a sense at the time of the risk of that you did?
Oh, most definitely, because If I can take you back, this was the 80s.
Yeah.
GE was the number one company in the world.
It's huge, yeah.
Everyone wanted to work for GE. Think of it today. I don't know what a similar thing would be. Google, or, one of the hottest companies on the planet, most valuable company in the United States at the time. And when I landed there, I just couldn't believe it. My own background was, really came out of a middle class. There's nothing, looking at me early in my life, would people have said, oh, she'll end up having a really great role at GE. So it was a much bigger risk than it seemed on the face of it, because, I had sort of everything most people try to get in their career, and I chose to leave it. And like, some of my friends were shrill when I told them I was going to go to this little startup, which of course was a huge risk. But I believed with all my heart they had more of a potential to be successful in changing the world in the way we all dreamed than the big company that was known as GE. And it turned out, of course, to be true.
Absolutely. They were the early days, weren't they?
Yeah.
Did you have any sense at the time with AOL of what it could become and the impact?
No question. By that time, I already was major believer in the vision of using technology to empower people, to democratizing access to ideas and information and communication, all the things today that we experience every day, but back then just was not an option for most people.
So what do you think some experiences that you had then in those early days at AOL that sort of shaped the trajectory of your career?
Well, I'll tell you some experiences that maybe didn't so much shape the trajectory of my career, but really made me understand the impactful business we were building. One is kind of a sweet, humble story. We had this thing called the Quilters Forum. And so all these, mostly women from all over the United States, who were quilters in these remote communities or whatever, would get together and share patterns. It was really a very sweet thing. And then they decided to build one quilt in collaboration with each other from all over the nation. Today, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but back then, people just weren't connected. It was really quite an innovation. So they brought the quilt to AOL and presented it to us. And I think for all of us, it was just one of those moments where we realized the dream that we would bring communities together was really happening in this very sweet way. So now go way over here, a very different experience, but still pretty early. Our system went down one night, and it was down for several hours. And on the news that night, they reported that there was evidence of water on Mars, which, I've got a big geek side to me. It's like, hold the phones, water on Mars? Like, that is headline news. Except that was news story number 2. AOL being down
Is that right?
was news story number 1. And I think that's when we knew, whoa, we are like at a whole different level.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So that risk has really been sort of a theme in your life. And this really led you, I think, to your book. We'll talk about it for a moment, the Be Fearless book. So that's sort of a core tenet of your career, going from this big organization like GE, going to a risky sort of a startup.
Yeah.
And the book really is about this rallying cry for bold leadership that you talk about, and to stop waiting for perfect conditions to take action.
Yeah.
So talk about these themes that sort of came through from, I guess, your early days, but also what impelled you to write the book.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, the book was a result of 7 years of research. We have a family foundation, the Case Foundation, which I've run since its founding. And as I traveled all over the world to different types of communities, sectors, it doesn't matter. What I would see is pretty much everyone had a dream of a better world or things that could be different. And so we began to go to school on this idea, this really big question about, so why do some people act on it and some people don't? And then when some people act on it, what's the difference between those who break through and those that's kind of like, meh, good try, right? So we literally hired a team of social scientists to look at this issue, go across sectors, go across geographies, go across history, and say what was present where breakthroughs and transformational change did happen. And those principles became eminently clear. And that's really what the book is about. We call it 5 Principles for a Life of Breakthroughs and Purpose. And it is very social science based. And we had been I don't want to say teaching it because that sounds like we're talking to you, but sharing it is probably a better way to say that. Around the world, I would sit with companies, I would sit with nonprofit organizations, governments even, and share these principles. The really intense need for innovation in different ways of moving forward. And time again, they said more people need to get access to this message. We think it'd be great if you do a book. And that's the reason there's a book today.
So talk a little bit about the 5 principles.
Sure. Well, they are very much based on risk. And it's really funny because I speak a lot to large audiences. And whenever you talk about taking risks, you can literally see the discomfort in the body language. It's at that point that people will start shifting in their seats or looking down or, just really getting uncomfortable. The principles say they really start with make a big bet. And taking a big bet is a risky thing because what it asks of you is to not think incrementally. And James, you're doing that here at Exclusive Resorts. It would be so easy for you to say, we've got a good thing going, let's just do more of this good thing and make it incrementally better. And there are many environments in which you'd be patted on the back and it's like, go James, right? But you want more than that. You want a transformational difference for this business and the purpose of it. And that's really what it's calling on. But to do that, you have to get outside your comfort zone. So we talk about taking risks. And, I think one thing that became clear as we looked at case study after case study is we say nothing good comes from the comfort zone. I mean, you feel good. It's a good place to spend time, but it's not going to ever be transformational to just stay in what's comfortable. So that's really sort of the ethos of what the principles in the book are about.
I love that. I think one of the things I say a lot here to young people in our organization is that every day, if you can do something that will push you a little bit,
there you go,
and get yourself outside of your comfort zone, it's going to help you grow, help us
question.
grow. We expand, we learn.
Right.
And I love this sort of concept of sort of like embracing this idea of sort of failure as well. And one of the things you talk about is that being fearless does not mean the absence of fear. It's kind of pushing through it.
Yeah. And I think I'm really kind of a good spokesperson for this because I would have never said I was fearless. Even though I took risks, I would have never said I was fearless. I often am filled with quite a bit of fear or insecurity going into a situation. But I have totally learned the discipline of pushing past that fear and understanding that if you can, oh, by the way, on the other side is really good stuff.
Yeah.
And you touched on failure. I mean, failure is a huge message here because it's another one of those things, James, where when you're talking about it, if we were at a cocktail hour right now or around a table, people don't want to talk about their failures. In fact, they're embarrassed by them. Often they're ashamed of them. But it's actually through failure that we grow and develop and find new pathways forward. And so when I speak on college campuses or I'm teaching a class at a university, I start with my failure resume. Because even the first thing we talked about, it was out of failure that my whole career in tech started. But as I look at every pivotal moment in my life, I can identify a failure that happened probably somewhere just before that set up that situation. I'm talking about the really big things.
Yeah.
And so I think we do a disservice to everyone, but most especially young people as they're getting started. They should have failures if they're trying big things.
Yeah.
And we don't want them feeling like, oh, I failed, it's over. And so I'll often bring in others to talk about their failures too, because I think if we get comfortable with this idea that when you're trying new audacious things, you don't bat 1,000%. It just doesn't work that way.
I like that a lot. One of our other members who I interviewed early on in one of our podcasts, a guy called Jimmy DiMatteo, and he was a Top Gun fighter pilot.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
And he said that at the end of every session that they would fly for maybe an hour, and they would debrief for like 3. And it was all about, the skipper would start off the conversation about where he made mistakes and where he failed, and that would sort of open up the conversation. And I think that also comes with it. I think there's a sort of a sense of being comfortable, being a little bit vulnerable as well with that, wouldn't you say?
Most definitely. I mean, yeah, most definitely vulnerability is hard for everyone, and failure and talking about it, or even just coming to terms with it is a vulnerable thing. Oprah gave this great talk at Harvard commencement, and she talked about look, you're going to have to probably go dig a hole in the ground for a little while and just go wallow in that because it doesn't feel good when you fail. But come out of that, look at what happened, see what pieces you can pick up and go forward after that.
Do you think in today's world, like the younger generation today they live in such a more of a public forum than I think certainly my generation,
Yes.
your generation probably did, or our generation did. And do you think that there is more of a willingness to embrace failure for younger generations today, or is it something they really have a hard time dealing with?
I think this whole idea of being always on camera, always, right? Like having to have that pithy, come back in the situation, etc. I think it has made for, a more risk-averse generation. But I also think that there's something that is creating risk aversion that we don't appreciate as much. We've largely taken away play from young people. Mm-hmm. Play outside, play in places that aren't, quote unquote, sanitized and safe. Yeah. And so what we really want is our kids having failures and taking risks while they're still in the context of a family, because we can lift them up, we can bring them to a better place, etc. If the first time you're encountering that is on your own and you don't have that sort of deep system, but I'm talking about everything from jumping off a tree to, like the things I was allowed to do as a young person, I give thanks for every single day, because today it would just be considered so radical. I was off on my own. I was out in nature. I was doing things no one would let a kid do. But my mom had faith in me that I was a good kid, and my memory is, you go, girl. That's my memory.
Good for you.
Yeah.
For her too.
But today, we don't want our kids even to walk to school alone for good reason. I understand the world's a more dangerous place, so this is not judging anybody who thinks twice. But if you're taking that away, then how can you replace that? Where can you put them to fall, literally? Where can you put them to challenge them, with perseverance, like outside of you guiding everything and being there every moment?
So taking it into a sort of a corporate context, at the Case Foundation, you did these failure forums.
We did. Right? Fail fests, we called them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fail fests.
Yeah, fail fests.
So talk about those.
Well, I often say the important thing about them is they were much more effective when beer and wine were involved.
Fair enough.
Because you'd find people a little more in the spirit of talking about, I don't know, things that may be in the cold heart of fluorescent lights in an office you wouldn't. But we would often put them in kind of a cocktail hour setting. We would tee up before we got in the rooms a few people who are willing to go first, which is really important. And it's amazing when one person starts talking about their failure, then others will feel the comfort to chime in. And we always had them under the radar screen. They could never be, we couldn't tweet about them. It wasn't like they were on the record at all. And honestly, James, I would say there were some really powerful moments in those gatherings.
Can you share a couple of those that were powerful moments?
Well, then I would be violating what I just said, but I'll share my own. Okay. I'll share my own, which was, I would tell the story, and it is a real toughie, and I wrote about it in the book. We started a huge global clean water initiative, largely targeted at sub-Saharan Africa, where we were putting in these, we called them play pumps. They were essentially merry-go-rounds that as kids spun on them, it was a well that brought clean water up from the ground. So you had all kinds of benefits going on there. For many reasons, way too complex to get into here, it was clear it wasn't working. We had targeted 1,000 communities. The scale was not as much the issue as some quality problems developed. The communities had different thoughts. It was not working. So we had this board meeting. I was chairing the board. We had a lot of high-profile people on that board. And I had to bring to the board that, look, we have a choice to make. This is failing in a way none of us would be comfortable with. We've put a lot of our resource and our reputations on the line here. So we either have to decide that, we're doubling down and we're going to spend the next few years course correcting, or we're going to get out.
Which is a hard decision to make.
Really hard decision to get out, or really hard decision to make. So we have an office that's comprised of glass walls, kind of like your office here. And I was trying not to let my facial expression show really the serious nature of it, because I really figured anyone watching out there would be nervous about what was going on in there. But anyway, we made the decision that rather than really dig deep and sort of pivot 100%, we had to basically stop the initiative. And I wrote about it. And I came clean and said it was a failure. And I was pretty sure I'd never get another partner again. I was pretty sure all the high-profile people that I had reeled into it with us would never want to work with us again. No, I really was. I even remember, because back then they were blogs, and I remember just my finger when I had to hit the send button, not wanting to send it because I was really filled with fear. But the opposite happened. I got calls from all over, including many of our partners, who said, when you do big audacious things, and this was a really big audacious thing, sometimes it's not going to work. We believe we did everything we could. We're really saddened. It's not like we're dancing because it's over. But we hope people down the line can learn. Because I was very specific about what we might have done better. And many people even since have told me they looked at that sort of playbook where I said we should have done this or we didn't do that. And then it mattered to them as they took forward their own initiatives.
That's a really hard thing to do when you're midway through an initiative. To stop and say, it's in some cases it's easy to double down and keep going.
Right.
That it is to sort of say, this is a mistake, we're going to stop.
Right.
It's taken a lot of guts to do.
Right. We need to sunset a lot of things in this world that we just keep on keeping on with long after they've proven their effectiveness or their quality. And we were really committed that we weren't going to do that. But it was hard, and
I'm sure.
there's not an easy way for me to convey how hard that was.
But also the example that sets the fact that you're willing to do that in front of your organization, your team, with so many partners, it's a huge testament. It really is.
Well, I think it helped then. It opened up dialogue with some other institutions doing some other big audacious things to say, all right, we're having some problems too.
Yeah.
And then behind closed doors, we could kind of help each other. And whereas before they felt like, well, maybe we can't really say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So also in the book, you talk about drawing inspiration from leaders that make big bets. And but one of the things you advocate is this shouldn't be limited to people in positions of power. So I think people think, well, if this is really people who are in high power positions making these big decisions, things. How do you bring that down to sort of the day-to-day? And how can people sort of embrace this and think about taking risks and challenging the status quo a little bit more in their daily lives?
Well, you and I haven't talked about this at length, so I'll make some presumptions, and it may or may not be true. Okay. But what's quite common is if people aren't familiar with the work we did, and most aren't, right? Because you try to scratch just the surface of a world when you bring a message out. The bottom line is there is a bias that to have transformational breakthroughs or really change something in a meaningful way, you have to have money.
Yep.
You have to have connections. Maybe you had to go to the right school. Maybe you had to get a certain kind of degree. Maybe you had to come from the right place. I could go on, right? Do all those resonate with you? Do you think that generally when you think about people really breaking through? Most people think that, whether you do or not. So we tried to bust that myth here by making it clear that the truth is talent is universal. It's opportunity that is not.
That's interesting.
And so I wrote about people you've never heard of. I wrote about people from communities you'll never go to or never hear of. And really tried to draw the picture of how anyone, anywhere, for the most part, I'm not being overly naive here, but many, many people, despite challenges they face, can break through. And I think I'm a walking example of that. My mom was a single mother raising a family of 4. We were, I thought we were kind of, okay, lower middle class, felt like a middle class neighborhood, but I think we were actually economically even lower than that. When President Reagan offered me the opportunity to come to work in Washington, I hadn't graduated college yet. I don't have a college degree.
Really?
I'm chairman of National Geographic.
Wow.
So I really try to use my own situation to say, gosh, you could look at me as a series of deficits, and I'm not kidding. They're just bing, 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 bing. Like what gave her that opportunity? But if you get the opportunity, and sometimes you do, you grab that brass ring and you make the most of it. But that has been my experience as I've traveled the world. Remember that I said I was really bothered about why do some people break through and others don't, and it wasn't obvious what the difference was. it really is the application of these principles
Yeah.
where you can. And whenever I say that, I really worry that I'm sounding insensitive to the struggles and the challenges many, many people have. And there are many that probably you simply can't overcome. But for most people in this world, there's a way forward.
I think the theme that I really like is that it's as you talked before, it's pushing through that little bit of anxiety. If
Or
I look
not.
at or not, right? But if I look at most of the people that I work with, or even our team here, that are real high performers,
Yeah,
most of the ones that are really good,
yeah.
they have that little bit of anxiety.
They do.
And they just push through it. And I think it fuels them through.
It does. It's a fuel. That's a really good way to put it. It can be a motivator. It can,
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah. You know, it's funny though, I believe so strongly in this that like when we have a position we're getting ready to post for, but typically we don't require a college degree because we don't think that necessarily tells us what
not
we're
necessarily
looking
indicated.
for.
Yeah.
You know, curious, self-starter, go-getter, those things are, in my humble opinion and the realms I've dealt in, really determinants of will this person be great?
Yeah. So talking great, let's switch gears to National Geographic for a second.
Sure. Great institution.
Great institution.
No bias.
So exactly. So the National Geographic Society was founded in 1888, and you made history in 2016 as the first female chair. What did that milestone mean to you personally? And what kind of responsibility came with it?
Yeah, so people use that a lot. For me, it was much less about the female thing, even though I realize for some that's a really important milestone they'll look to. It really comprises a lot of what I just told you about. But you know, what I think is just the coolest thing in the world is we were started in 1888, and if you look around in this world, there aren't a lot of institutions still standing. We disrupt ourselves constantly. We try to peek around the corner, which is one of the principles in the book, and see what's coming and be ready for it. You know, a lot of people don't realize National Geographic was founded by 33 individuals, all really different people. It was we would call it a very diverse table of talents and backgrounds and skills. Some of them just, you know, audacious people, like John Wesley Powell, who I don't know if you know of him, but he basically mapped the Colorado River, the first to, through the Grand Canyon. He was a Civil War hero with one arm when he did that.
Amazing.
I mean, the audacious nature of our founders were amazing. So they believed we lived in a world where there was this, what do I want to say, just revolution of new science and exploration, and we were learning new things all the time about the world, but most people were unaware. So they created the National Geographic Society to tell the stories of what was going on in the world, and they used a commercial business to do that, which was a subscription to the magazine. And they took all those profits and they threw them over the wall and then funded more science and exploration. So it's kind of this really awesome virtuous circle of, you know, we're doing we're covering and we're doing all this really neat stuff, but then over here we're telling those stories. And essentially that is very much our model today, where we have the parent, which is called the National Geographic Society, which has been around since 1888. And we fund over 15,000 grants to date, but we're on the forefront of everything that's cool in science and exploration and what's out there in the world. And then we have this amazing media megaphone. We touch 2 billion people every month.
I didn't realize it was
through
that big.
all of our platforms
That's
and
incredible.
channels. 2 billion. No one else on
incredible.
the planet is doing that. So it's an exciting time where we're able to harness technology and media to really just drive more curiosity, more knowledge, more, you know, action around things in our world that we think people need to know about. But very, very, even though the way we do it is so dramatically different than how they did it in 1888, the fundamentals, the DNA is still there.
So at Exclusive Results, we partnered with National Geographic Foundation on the Around the World Jet, which we just finished. We did 9 countries in 21 days, which is an amazing trip. And we've done that now, I think, for 4 years in a row, which is incredible. And we also work with Lindblad a lot as well. National Geographic has a very unique model for the not-for-profit. Can you explain more about that?
So it kind of goes back to what I was saying about how we were founded. We have this, exciting media, travel, a number of commercial businesses that sit in a joint venture that's all commercial businesses, and that rolls up to our global nonprofit, which is the National Geographic Society. So we have a partner in our joint venture, which is Disney. And so if you turn on Disney Plus today, there are 5 tiles, and you know a lot of them, right? They're brands you know well. One of them is National Geographic. If you go on global travel, you can go anywhere in the world with us through Lindblad. And we're very proud, by the way, of the partnership we've had with Exclusive Resorts. In many ways, I feel like the Exclusive Resorts members share DNA with people who love National Geographic and vice versa, right? They're curious travelers in this world. They don't want to just pass through. They want to know. They want to, really have a meaningful experience when they travel to other places. And essentially, that's what we've been trying to do through our travel businesses for a long time.
So you said 2 billion people a month is the reach of National Geographic. So
can I explain that a little?
Yes, please.
All right. So if you think about our platforms, right, we are the largest brand in social media. There's no other brand in the world that has as many followers as we do. I think we're at 300 million just on Instagram.
That's incredible.
Alone. Okay.
What are you saying? 300 million on Instagram.
I think that's
alone.
our number. I didn't check
That's
it
an
before I came.
incredible.
Pretty sure that's right
number.
where we are. But by the time you add Facebook, TikTok, all the different platforms, and part of the reason we've had so much success there, of course, it's been intentional, and it's an amazing management team that does this. But also, look, we're all about photographs and videos, and we have been for a really long time. And so we naturally had sort of the stuff that makes social media sing even before others did, where they had to sort of create it for social media. It's just what we do is tell powerful stories through video and through photographs, and we have for a really long time. Then we have our cable channels. Then we have Disney Plus. Then we have the magazine. We have consumer products all over the world. We take many, many people every year onto exciting travel experiences. So it really is, one way or another, about 2 billion people a year touch our brand.
So with that level of reach that you have, such a powerful platform for driving awareness and action, how do you link those two things together?
Well, we say that we believe in the power of science, exploration, education, and storytelling to illuminate and protect the wonder of our world. That's the business we're in. We're using all of these platforms to illuminate the world, and we hope it drives action so people care about the world and they do something about it. So it doesn't really matter how many people touch our brand if at the end of the day something great doesn't happen. I mean, this really is about really trying to help people care and take it personally and do something because of it.
I love that. I love that. We talk a lot about the fact that travel in our world opens the mind, it opens the eyes, it opens the heart, but to connect that with sort of knowledge and awareness and action is an incredible thing. So how do you honor the legacy and tradition of exploration at National Geographic and that sort of science and storytelling while also sort of pushing into the future?
Yeah, we have a saying that we're a 137-year-old startup because we constantly are willing to disrupt ourselves, to stop anything we've been doing, to start anything new that makes sense to take us further, to strengthen the brand or the mission. And so I think that gives us, we just have this fearless DNA, and I've often thought that the reason there's fearless DNA in our boardroom is because how can you stand next to these people on the front lines of the unknown every day and then, wither? Okay, that's not going to happen. They embolden us. And I think every person around the board table is feels so privileged to be there. And one of the coolest things, James, when I became chair, I think I mentioned this to you before, the organization's board had never gone outside the United States in over 100 years for a board meeting. Yet where's our work? It's all over the world. It's everywhere. It's in the United States, but it's all over the world. So I began a tradition that every other year we do a week-long board retreat. We go into the field with our explorers. We see their work up close and personal, and sometimes a little more personal and up close than we're comfortable with. But it's great because then we come back under fluorescent lights and we're talking about these things and we have real context and real conviction around we're going to keep doing this. But we do need to disrupt ourselves. So AI, right? You know, that's going to mean really big changes for National Geographic. Right now, we're working through that with management. What does that look like? What are the implications? We're not sitting on the sidelines waiting for something to be done to us. We're going to be at the forefront as we've always been. And that's why I think we're still standing 137 years later.
So talk about the board a little bit. You said there's 23?
23.
23 directors. How do you select those people? How do you identify them? And what is the typical makeup of a board member?
Well, we select them very carefully. It is a table that is comprised of people from different sectors. We have a number of global business leaders. We have a number of global nonprofit and foundation leaders. We have scientists. And another change we've just made in recent years is we now have an explorer representative on the board as well, which was never a part of the board construct before. But I talk about our board creation is quite different than most institutions. We use what I call an algorithmic approach. You know, the world brings us cycles, and at any given cycle, you need different talents, different backgrounds, different skills. So we sort of keep track of, well, who's on the board now? What backgrounds and expertise and sort of value do they bring? And what are we missing? And if we go into a new cycle, it means, oh gosh, when this one rolls off, we have to look for someone from here, for instance. And that's been a really effective way to build a board that brings full strength in all the areas that we need. And so as a result, you know, we've worked with a lot of other institutions who've asked for it, and we sort of train them up on this is our approach on board building.
In this algorithmic approach, is this something that was new to National Geographic?
Yes.
Was this part of your tech background that you brought?
Yes, it is. It is, yeah. I mean, I don't really think of it as a tech thing as much as going back to the book, Be Fearless. The research couldn't be any clearer. The data is very clear. The different perspectives and different backgrounds working together bring better outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what we don't want is a table full of just scientists, a table full of just business people, a table full of just nonprofit leaders. This is a mashup of all of those things, and it is truly a beautiful thing to watch what happens as a result. I think if you talk to any of our trustees, they would just tell you that it's a beloved institution to serve, and we all get great joy out of it.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I'd like to be flying the wall of those board meetings. That'd be very interesting.
So come sometime.
Maybe I will if I can find it. So the Society's awarded 15,000 grants since it was established in 1888, and last year raised 112 million. Can you talk about how you identify recipients and the process of awarding grants?
Sure. Well, you know, there are very few people I've ever met in life who didn't want to be a National Geographic explorer. I don't care how old they are or how young they are. They all want to be National Geographic explorers. I did too, by the way. I mean, I was definitely a young explorer out there on my own right, but it's a super rigorous process. But you know, one of the things that I really love, James, is that when you come into the National Geographic family as a grantee, we're not just going to take you by the hand. We're going to come alongside, train you up, skill you up in ways. You know, it's funny, there's this thing called science telling, because so often, like, a scientist will have this amazing idea and absolutely no way to communicate it because communication isn't their thing, okay? So we truly train up and skill up our explorers on so many different fronts. And then what we've seen with a number of them is they'll come in as perhaps young explorers and then continue to elevate, you know, through kind of different levels of our work. And some have even become what we call explorers in residence that way, which is the highest. Explorers at large and explorers in residence.
Each explorer can get multiple grants and awards. Is that how it works?
Over time, as their work is proven out to be effective and as they become leaders in their own right, one of the coolest things, and here you really should come, I think we've talked about this before, but I can't remember. We do what we call an Explorers Festival once a year where we bring them all home.
Yeah.
And that happens in the summertime. So they're spending that week getting trained up, meeting each other.
And these all come into DC?
All coming to DC.
How many people come to that?
So I think we had the largest number this past summer, which was around between 350 and 400.
That's a lot.
Came from I mean, we've had them come from 150 countries,
Yeah.
so it's really quite something. So anyway, it is really a very special moment. So they come and they do very brief presentations of their work, especially if they're early in the process. And then, of course, as you move up that ladder, you have more time to come
Right.
and present your work. And they're just, for me, it is truly my favorite week of the year of anything that I do, to go and to see these amazing innovators, scientists, people out there on the front lines doing the most remarkable things.
And how many people get turned down for the awards each year?
A lot. Most.
Is it?
Yeah.
So if you get an award and you're a grantee, then you're really
Right.
You're
You
right.
should think about it a little bit almost like getting into a really
into
good
college. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So looking forward, you've what's the next frontier for National Geographic? What's the
Oh gosh, I think it's so fun because our CEO, Jill Tieventhaler, who is amazing, she came in 2020, and when she came, she did a 5-year strategic plan.
Yeah.
So we're at the end of that, and truly we can kind of feel really good that all that intentional work has mostly been achieved and even beyond. We're just now beginning the process of looking at the next 5 years. And it's a perfect time because we are in such a disrupted state everywhere we look. I mean, across sectors, across the globe, the pace of change, the volume of change is unbelievable. What a great time to step back and say, okay, so how do we bring to it what we should be bringing in this world now? And that's that disrupt yourself mentality. And I'm super excited to see what we come forward with. But it's a process that will take about a year before we're ready to stand up and say, this is really the meaningful new sort of strategy that we're going forward with. But I'd say every day is something new. I'll give you an example of how the world is changing so rapidly. One of our explorers, his name is David Gruber. He's done a tremendous amount of work with sperm whales for a long time. And the really super exciting thing is we can say today that sperm whales will be the first non-intelligent species, and intelligence, we have to be a little careful with that term, whose alphabet has been decoded. David and his team, because of AI, today we have decoded, we're most of the way there,
That's
on
amazing.
decoding the language of the sperm
That's incredible.
whales. Now, why does that matter? Well, somewhere along the way, NASA rang up David and said, kind of feels like if you could make out the language of a sperm whale, if we had some, say, new species arrive that either come to us or we go to them, can some of these tools be applied? And so NASA is now a partner in that work. And what we found through the years is we think we're kind of doing one thing. And it turns out that that one thing has much broader implications than maybe the original, grant proposal suggested, or even when we gave the grant, what we might have expected.
So looking back over the last 10 plus years, and that's obviously one of the things that you can be incredibly proud of, but what are the other things that you're incredibly proud of that you've done through your tenure?
I would just say I'm incredibly proud of how we've shown up in the world, because I think we continue to bring, and I hope I've conveyed it properly, a humility in what we do. We have gifts and talents and resources and tools that we can give to this world and let the world take advantage of and use, and then tell the stories. I mean, one thing I think I haven't made clear enough is we actually think our superpower is storytelling. So, I mean, we do all this amazing stuff over here, but if that happened and nobody knew about it, totally underleveraged. I think what National Geographic has been known for since the beginning is the amazing storytelling capabilities, whether that's visually, whether that's in written word, and I think that the way we've shown up in the world in the last 10 years, I think we've tried to ask big questions about where we should be and the difference we can make. And then we've worked really hard to not only tell the stories ourselves, but as I've tried to make clear, empower many, many others to do so as well, and fund a lot of that work.
Amazing accomplishment, amazing tenure. To have such a level of impact across so many people and lives is extraordinary.
I really, though, there's no way I would sit here and take credit, and this is not false humility. we just have this remarkable board.
Yeah.
We have this amazingly talented leadership and management team at the society. And then, I mean, our partner is Disney. Okay,
Yeah.
The partners we've had have also vaulted our work. So it's kind of been like a beautiful storm of things that have come together.
Very cool. I want to come to your Explorers Week one of these days. So moving on a little bit to philanthropy and leadership with purpose. You've spoken a lot about growing up with modest means. How do you think that has shaped your approach to philanthropy and investing?
Well, I mean, there's certainly an underlying ethos of to whom much is given, much is expected. But in my family, even when much wasn't given, much was expected. Okay. I mean, we were always taking what little we had and trying to be there for others, largely, because my mom just modeled that in every single way. Hardworking, single mom of 4, waitress. I'd come home from school, she'd go to work. Because if you're a waitress, the only time you make money is at night, right? Yeah. But still, she found a way to just be there in a material way for others in both small and big ways. So I think that was just present. I am a person of very deep faith, and I think my faith calls me to watch after my brother and my sister, and I've tried to do that. But also, I mean, I think that I get really jazzed at the opportunity to bring opportunities to others who may not otherwise have it. And I think that does go to, I tell the story when I had the privilege of going to a private school on full scholarship. So in that world, that was the elite's elite. That's, the kids I sort of had play dates with or became my close friends all came from extreme privilege. And then I'd come back to my neighborhood, and a lot of working people, a lot of people had the same hopes and dreams for their lives and the lives of their children, but they were missing opportunity. That was the big difference. It wasn't like they were smart and harder working, and they weren't. And I think I just get really jazzed at the opportunity. And it goes back to what brought me to tech, to empower others and bring opportunities to them as well. I was a recipient of it. I'd love to pass it along.
Is your mother still alive?
She is not. She's been gone for 14 years.
She was very proud of what you've accomplished.
And I'm very proud of her, as I'm trying to make clear.
I'm sure. So what is, so when you think of philanthropy, how would you measure success in philanthropy?
Measure success in philanthropy?
Yeah.
So I think there's a soft way and a more structured way. Believe it or not, I feel like there have been in the time that my husband and I, since we created the foundation, almost 30 years ago now, the tools and the measurements and the standards are much clearer today in philanthropy than they were when we got started. And I love data, but I have a love-hate relationship with data because, you do sort of owe it to understanding, are you making a difference or you're not? Are your resources being used wisely or aren't they?
Yeah.
But there are some times when you just know it's the right thing to do, and there's never going to be data that makes that entirely clear.
And what does that look like when when you have that sense that this is instinctively right? What does that feel like?
Well, so, one of our earliest initiatives was with the digital divide. And we saw communities across the nation. We saw this digital tsunami happening, but a lot of people didn't have access at all to it. We didn't have any data to tell us that if we gave them access, in the end, they might perform better at school, they might do. And I'm taking you back before social media, because social media has turned all that on its ear. We knew it was the right thing to do. We had no data to back it when we went into it, 0 data. But we knew it was the right thing to do, and it turned out it actually was. So.
You're also a winery owner. Changing gears a little again. And what inspired you to step into that world?
So we're Virginians, and we've been Virginians for 43 years. And I love my home state. And it became clear that there was a burgeoning sector that could strengthen the state and maybe bring some amazing new wine to the world in the process. And by the way, a lot of people would say California was first in wine. That's actually not the case. Virginia was. Thomas Jefferson.
Is that right?
Thomas Jefferson very famously, but
Yeah.
even before Thomas Jefferson, at Jamestown, for you to have a plot of land, right? This is the first community in what we call the United States today. You had to commit to have a couple of grapevines to help provide wine for
That's
the community.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So Virginia has a
real
deep
legacy
and rich history. But we just became kind of believers that the promise of the quality of Virginia, and I'll say this very boldly, will compete with the best wine regions in the world.
Wow.
And against the best wines in the world.
Wow.
And our team is proving that every day. It's Early Mountain Vineyards,
Yep.
just north of Charlottesville. And the accolades are getting, the awards are winning, the reviews, the scores, everything is proving it out. It's a long slog to be, as you know, coming from a wine country area yourself. It's farming at the end of the day.
It is, yeah.
It is. And a lot of people think about, oh, wine's so cool, or it's, hoity-toity, or whatever. It's farming. That's what it is, to create great
So
wine.
that was another big bet
It was a big bet.
in your well-being.
And we're still deep in the midst of
Yeah.
the big bet. Yes.
Good for you. Good for you. So when you think about the next generation and you're thinking about philanthropy, what are the sort of opportunities that you would look at for people who want to make a difference going forward?
In the next gen?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the way they will do it is probably not the traditional way that it's been done. And by the way, when we came into philanthropy, people thought we were disruptive, because we wanted to do things a little differently. Like, for instance, there were many times we let the public decide where our grants would go. That was just super radical then. But I think the next gen will redefine philanthropy. And I'm a little bothered by sort of a worldview today that philanthropy is only institutional. I've always been a really big believer in personal philanthropy that we can all practice. And I'll give you an example of that. So my mom was a waitress, right? She didn't believe in taking advantage of any programs. That was her decision, right? She didn't want to feel like we were going to do that. So she worked as a waitress. All of my siblings worked. I went to work pretty early. And, I think it was just, that's what we were going to do. But I'll tell you, on any given night, if mom got a more generous tip, it suddenly meant that maybe we could get new shoes. Maybe, if the wash machine hadn't been working for 3 months, maybe it could top off what we needed to buy a new washer. These are very real things in the lives of people who struggle.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should, generosity doesn't just come through institutions. It often comes person to person. And we don't realize that in how we go about our business every single day, there might be an opportunity to be just a little more generous. I'm not talking about busting the bank here or whatever. But if everybody took on a little bit of that, James, we probably wouldn't need all these nonprofits and philanthropies that we have that are trying to fill a lot of that gap.
So these small acts of kindness have quite significant
Absolutely.
repercussions.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing. I mean, I witnessed it, I lived it. I'm here largely because somebody paid for my scholarship at that private school. I'll never know who did, but somebody did. And I don't think that was an institution, and yet it changed a life forever.
It's the concept of paying it forward, isn't it?
Yeah, and in small ways, how can you make, and it isn't always money, right? It can be mentoring, it can be any number of things. But so I think the next gen is mostly averse to big institutions. They don't trust them.
Right.
And in many cases, some of them have good reason for that if you think about what their lives have taken them through. So I think it's going to look different. And I think it'll be a good thing.
So what is something you value now that you didn't a decade ago?
Spending time alone, because I didn't have any time to spend alone before, in the act of raising children and trying to have a career and trying to be a loving, supportive spouse and do all the things, be there for my friends, be there for my family. As our kids, launched, I began to recognize the importance of alone time in terms of, I've always been reflective, but I didn't necessarily associate that with spending time alone. And for me, it's quite valuable.
I'm sure, I think it's one of those things that we never give ourselves enough time for. That sort of self-care element is so important, isn't it? So how do you sharpen the knife? And what is a daily ritual that you protect at all costs?
I start my day with reading and prayer and reflection. And sometimes that's a really short period of time, maybe 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes that can extend out to an hour, depending on the circumstances around me. I try to remove myself from any busy area. And I find that my days are much better. My spirit going into the day is much improved if I make time for that. I also just am a big believer in ritual and routine. And there's actually a lot of data coming out of psychology now about the many, many benefits of that.
Of routine, daily routine.
Of routine, that it, from a mental health standpoint, it has real benefits to committing yourself to routine. And then lastly, I would say, I'm crazy about the outdoors. I couldn't live in a world that I couldn't get outside. So I try to really discipline myself that no matter what my day holds, and I mean literally no matter what my day holds, I will find a way to get outside.
I think that self-care element is so important today. I think people tend not to think about that too much. We live in such a busy world, but finding time where you can just sort of center and have time on your own is so critical. So when you think about your legacy and the impact you most hope to leave behind for family and community and the world, what would that be?
So I think it'd be really great if people just ask themselves, did I help to make it better? In real time, not just waiting until they die and that question comes up. And what does that mean? It can be anything. It can be the professional relationship. It can be the company you work for. It can be your church, your community, your neighborhood. But I think that it's a good life if you try to use that as a North Star. And so I wouldn't call it a legacy, but I certainly hope that the purpose and intent that I've brought to my life means that I've made it a little better in some ways.
I think we all hope that, don't we? It's a great place to be. So last question. So as you think from your chair in the role of National Geographic, what is one place in the world that might have changed how you've seen things or changed your perspectives that you visited?
Can I tell you there's two?
Sure.
Because who has like one favorite child?
Yeah,
right?
go on.
Antarctica was definitely that.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And it wasn't just the extraordinary natural environment, but even what it is, that 50 countries come together and agree on what it is and is not. I mean, what a beautiful picture. It's kind of hard to even believe that exists and keeps
Surreal,
working.
isn't it?
Right?
Yeah.
What else would 50 countries just come together as kind of co-owners of and say, all right, we all agree this is kind of how it's going to be, and here we are. The other one is there's a place off the coast of Cuba that, in fairness, most people won't have the chance to go to, but I could because of my role with National Geographic. I'm a diver, and it's called the Gardens of the Queens. And it's a really interesting story and unintended consequences that turn out good. So Castro, because he controlled people, didn't let anyone leave. You couldn't own a boat. You couldn't go out in the water, etc. It means that there's this pristine place in our oceans sitting right off of Cuba. It's called a pristine sea. And it's like you turn back the clock on our planet.
It's untouched.
So I was able to dive there 3 times a day for a week with our lead explorer that does our pristine seas work. And James, as I was swimming around, a Goliath grouper would come alongside longer than I am. We were trying to do fish counts, but the counts were so extraordinary that there's no human fish count that can take place. We were, in a school of yellowfin tuna that had to have thousands and thousands that went on further than we could see. So it was life-changing for me in the sense that I could see, you know what, if we are a little kinder and gentler to some of the places that are really special on this earth, even if we didn't set out for the right reasons to do that, the benefits and the things that result are really quite extraordinary. So that truly was an unforgettable life experience.
Remarkable. Well, Jean Case, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast, A Life Well Lived.
Thank you, James. Been
really
great
enjoyed it.
chatting.
Stories like this are a window into what makes the exclusive resorts community unlike any other. filled with members who live with intention and travel without compromise. With more than 400 private residences and curated experiences around the world, the club continues to redefine the art of living well. Learn more at exclusiveresorts.com.